Hyperemesis gravidarum is a life-altering condition. In addition to the debilitating physical symptoms, it can also evoke several heavy and unwanted emotions and feelings. These feelings can be overwhelming and scary. No one understands the darkness caused by HG better than pregnancy sickness support. We are raising funds to be able to enhance our mental health support services with our Kind2Mind campaign. Together we can help HG sufferers start their lives again after the devastation caused by HG. In this new HG and mental health series, Fundraiser Faye talks to HG sufferers and members of our counselling team to uncover the devastating impact that HG can have on a sufferer's mental health. Today I am joined by peer support volunteer Hannah. Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today. You okay?
Yes, thank you.
So let's get right into it. Can you tell me, how many times have you had HG?
I've had it twice, so I've got 2 children, and I had it with both pregnancies.
And when did it become clear to you that this was not regular morning sickness?
I'd say probably around about 6 weeks pregnant. So within about a week of sort of the nausea starting, I managed, I think both times, very, very similar experiences. Finding out I was pregnant very, very early, around sort of 4 weeks. Managing to have about a week to a week and a half of feeling really happy, really enjoying it, eating what I wanted to, and then a bit of nausea started at 5 weeks and literally had, I think, both times 3-4 days of nausea, and then went straight into just sickness every day. So it was around 6 weeks. I just realised that I wasn't functioning like I usually could do, or like a normal pregnant person. And by 7 weeks with both pregnancies, I was signed off sick.
And what were the you've mentioned the sickness, but what were the physical symptoms of your HG?
So at first it was just nausea throughout the day. And then the sickness started, which stopped me being able to eat. And if I did eat, it was quite rare that I kept anything down. But then it got to the point that getting it down in the first place was quite difficult. I really struggled to drink as well. So I got quite dehydrated. In my second pregnancy, I was sent to hospital twice. Unfortunately, by the time I got to hospital, my levels of ketones had dropped again, so I was both times not given fluids, and particularly the second time I was sent home feeling just terrible and had quite a negative experience there. And I was stuck in the house generally for 2-3 months in the first trimester, really. I only really left the house to go to my medical appointments, and even then I'd have to either drive or get somebody to drive me, even though it's only a 10-minute walk to my GP. It was quite a big event to leave the house. I had to really sort of prepare for it. I wasn't able to be a sole parent to my older child for about 2 or 3 months after getting pregnant with my daughter, which was just horrible. He had to have a grandparent or one of my friends here to look after him. So obviously he was really confused, really upset and really worried. So it was a really big moment when I had the sickness all the way through both pregnancies, but it did ease around sort of 14 to 16 weeks. I slowly started to still have the nausea, still have sickness, but be able to function and leave the house. So it was a really big moment, or the first day that I actually could look after him by myself. But we told him, after my 12-week scan, we told him why I was poorly, but that the baby was going to make me better. And he really bought that story, which was really nice. My husband had to be a sole carer. So just nearly overnight, my whole day-to-day life just had to stop. I couldn't parent, I couldn't work. Even though I was in a role second time around where I worked at home, I really hoped I could keep going. I preemptively started meds. I was on 3 lots of meds, not just the one. I really hoped that, with a supportive employer, I'd be able to keep going, and I just had to admit defeat. It took over my life completely for a good 2 or 3 months, and then for the rest of the pregnancy, I couldn't leave the house without a ridiculous amount of snacks. I had to really plan everything. I you know, we're in obviously a post-COVID world. I definitely couldn't wear a mask. Took just everything I had to think about. I had to really be careful about when I eat my meals and not going too long, and yeah, just really every part of my life for quite a while.
So having your life turned upside down in that way, and everything that you love being taken away from you, so spending time with your little one and your work and everything like that, that's huge change. What did that do to your mental health?
The main thing that I remember is just a sense of loneliness. I couldn't go out a lot, so I wasn't really socializing, and I'm usually very sociable. I love food. We eat out. We know I go to cafes. That's the main thing I do on maternity leave now. And just not being able to enjoy food was horrible. You know, not being able to, having to eat as a chore and to force myself. But the main feeling was that loneliness that I felt that I had. My sister and my mum both have had similar, so they knew how I felt. But it was, you know, a different stage of life for them, and just being in the house, not being able to, you know, see my little boy start to ride his bike and do things like that and have those days out. I felt really left out and really sad that I couldn't join in those things, and just really lonely. There was quite a big difference, though, between my first and second pregnancy to some extent, in that having my son around was a lovely distraction. You know, he was there. Sometimes that made things harder because if I did have to look after him by myself, it was really tough. He watched a lot more TV than I would usually let him watch as a parent. He's now really good at going to the cinema, though, as a result, so we can have more days out now. Prepared him for long films. But I remember saying to my husband, I really miss him. I feel really jealous of you that you get to have this time with him. So I felt really lonely and left out. But first time round, I didn't even have my son to distract me. It was a heat wave. Everyone was out enjoying the weather. And I didn't have a lot of support first time around. But second time around, I had a peer supporter. I had my mum world, my mum community. And even though most of my mum friends hadn't had anything like it themselves, they were brilliant. And that I'd had probably more in my first pregnancy. But also just really low mood, just feeling absolutely rotten. And, you know, physically, emotionally, all the hormones on top of that. Particularly in my first pregnancy, I felt quite a lot of guilt because I thought I'm not eating a lot. And if I did eat, one of my things that I could eat was KFC and pork pie. So it wasn't the most sort of nutritious food that I was getting. You know, and vegetables completely turned my stomach in both pregnancies. I got an iron deficiency as well. So that guilt of, you know, am I giving the baby what they need? First time round, being a little bit unsure about meds, thinking, well, I need to take them because I need to get through, but is this going to have an impact on the baby? Again, that was something that was probably a bit less second time round because I'd had a perfectly healthy baby before, and it's one of the things I now say, do what you need to get through. Yeah. And I particularly had that view second time around, that it wasn't just about me helpfully getting through the pregnancy for my baby, but my little boy needed me. I had to be able to function, you know, with him to a certain extent as well, as much as I could. Meds were never going to make me completely better, but they generally stopped me having to go to hospital, which meant I could be around for him at least.
So Hannah, you've mentioned a few things there that I would have hoped that your healthcare professional would have talked to you about. So you touched on there that you were worried that you weren't getting enough nutrients to baby. You were worried about the effect of meds. I would have hoped that your doctor would have, or a midwife would have spoken to you about those concerns and sort of helped you to understand and not worry so much. I'm guessing that wasn't the case. Can you tell me about your healthcare professionals?
So when I first took the meds first time, my GP both times were pretty good, to be fair to them. The doctor was quite an experienced doctor who said there is a risk to the medication, but there's also a risk of you just, you know, not managing to function. So, you know, it's better than not being on it. So she didn't really go into the details about the risks. So that's when I then took the meds and then went away. And before I started taking them, I sort of read about them and got my husband to read about them and said, look, you know, do we feel that this is a weighed up risk? And knowing that actually the risks are very, very minimal. It's mainly because they can't do the research on pregnant women. So I looked at the data and realised that I was more than happy with the amount of women that had taken it and then reported or not reported issues afterwards. So I had got some information from my GP, but most of it was sort of going away and looking at places like pregnancy sickness support. Second time round, I was sort of better supported in the fact that because I knew what to expect, I straight away spoke to pregnancy sickness support and said I'm expecting to start to feel sick any day, and I was given some information about preemptively starting meds. And my GP was actually really brilliant. They supported me really well throughout the pregnancy, and I did actually write to them to say afterwards, thank you, because they weren't aware of sort of the newer research on preemptively taking medication, but let me send it to them, and then they found some of the guidance about it and agreed with me. So that by the time I actually started the meds, my nausea had started, so I didn't end up taking it much in advance. But they were able to make those decisions with me, and it was nice actually that in that situation that I felt I was able to influence the sort of the care plan that I had, which was really nice. Unfortunately, despite sort of being on sort of a combination of 3 meds, I still, and the GP kept a really close eye on me, which was brilliant. And despite we know the pressures on the NHS, and particularly post-COVID, the waiting list just to get a daily appointment was quite high. So they booked me in just for a phone review every couple of weeks, and when needed, they said, we want to test your urine for ketones, and sort of checked me. And that's when twice I got sent to the hospital. First time, they were really supportive, very just in tune with me. They didn't do much, that they injected my meds and gave me a bit of food, so it helped to some extent, but the effects were literally a couple of hours, and I was sent home again. They did a scan when you were 7 weeks old, so it was nice to know that everything was okay. And obviously they do the check to see if it's twins because of the severity of the hormone. Whereas the second time I got sent in, they'd made me wait until the next morning because they said based on my ketone levels that the GP had picked up on, they said that I would have needed to go on a drip for IV fluids, and I would have, because it was quite late in the day, they would have had to admit me onto the ward overnight, and they didn't have a bed. And particularly with my little boy already being quite anxious, I said, well, do you know what? I'm fine to wait for the morning. The GP agreed that I was clinically stable enough to, and so we agreed I was going to go back in the next morning. To do that, I had to obviously arrange all my childcare and everything. I didn't eat all morning because if I knew that getting in the car would make me sick. So I thought if I have an empty stomach, there's less chance of that. Got to the hospital, my ketones had dropped. And I sort of, shared the information with them about, trying not to just assess off ketones that I'd read about, but had a very cold nurse who, before even talking to me, she'd literally said, we in this pot, came back to me and hadn't even taken me into a room. I was literally in the waiting room, albeit with nobody else there, but still a waiting room. And she said, oh, you don't have any ketones, so we're just going to change your meds and send you home, without any conversation with me. And I just started crying and said, I feel terrible. I think the day before I'd managed to keep the equivalent of 1 small glass of water down. I'd just felt awful. I remember my mouth was dry, my hands were dry. I felt so dehydrated. And I said, I said all of this to her and said, can you not give me IV fluids? And she made me feel like I was completely overreacting. She told me that my sickness would stop at 12 weeks. I then had to tell her, well, actually, I've had this before and it lasted all the way till the end. She hadn't had taken any history from me, but as soon as she'd made a decision before even seeing me as a person, literally just from my urine. So she told me it would stop at 12 weeks and that being sick was a normal part of pregnancy. She then, once she did take me into a room and I tried to give her a bit of my history, I was just in tears and sort of begging, saying, I feel awful, please can I just have the fluids? And she didn't give me a tissue, didn't give me anything, and I was in tears. I combination of it being the gynae ward and post-COVID, it meant I could never take anyone in with me. So I had no one to advocate for me. I work in a professional context and, in sort of health and social care. I'm very used to sort of challenging meetings and talking to healthcare professionals and other workers, but I was out of my depth and I wasn't able to advocate for myself as clearly as I usually would have been able to. And I ended up getting sent back out to the waiting room. That I was given all my meds in one go injected, but this is about 8 a.m. So they gave me some toast whilst I just sat there sobbing to myself in a waiting room whilst trying to eat some toast. And then by 10 o'clock in the morning, I'd been sent home. A doctor did see me, but I felt that very strongly that the nurse had said, oh, she's, I think they'd spoken about me and made the decision that I hadn't met the threshold for fluids. So I got sent home by 10 in the morning. My sister picked me up. I got home and straight away was really sick and had the worst day of sickness that I'd ever had in either pregnancy. And my sister nearly drove me back to the hospital. But I said, there's no point, if they're not going to help, all they're going to do is make me worse. And I'd had all my meds in one go, first thing in the morning. So I had nothing else that I could take for the rest of the day. And thankfully, from the next day, I very slowly started to get better. Because I said to my husband, I said, I'm not going back. If the GP had been brilliant and had done everything they needed to do, but I said, if they try and send me again, all that's going to do is make me feel worse. I'm not going to feel belittled and helpless. And I just felt completely, utterly fed up and so miserable. Knowing more than anything with both pregnancies, it's what I wanted and it was what I had to get through to get the babies that I've always wanted. I hated people telling me it would be worth it. I wouldn't change the moment for what I've got now, but I felt that anyone saying to me, oh, it'll be worth it, completely invalidates your experience and makes you, we often are as women in pregnancy and in many other things, that vessel. We become a vessel to carry the baby. And I felt I wasn't seen as a person. It was, is the baby okay? Are you functioning enough to cope? Okay, then that's fine. And the fact that I was so emotional and just sobbing and the nurse didn't stop to show me any compassion, any warmth. And I mean, credit to the hospital. When I felt up to it, I straight away made some notes. I went into my sort of the mode that I do. I made some notes, and when I felt up to it, I wrote to the hospital and said, "There's a gap in learning here. I said I don't know if it's a complaint I'm making or if it's just comments, but here's the information and do with it what you want. But this was my experience." And the head of the ward actually called me and personally apologised. Didn't try and make any excuses. I said that they would speak to that member of staff and said that they wanted to do a training session using my experience to help staff, which obviously I was more than happy for them to do. I think I had one doctor tell me that it wasn't HG and HG was overdiagnosed and told me the reasons why it wasn't. He was a male doctor and I did have to, he was lovely, but I had to bite my tongue for saying, you have no idea what this feels like. And again, he said, it's not HG because for HG you have to have lost over 5% or whatever it is of your body weight, and reeled off all these things. I went, well, actually, I have lost that, more than that of my body weight. I think one point I was 7 something stone, and I think one of my pregnancies, I lost weight for the first trimester and a bit. With both pregnancies. By day 4 postpartum with this one, I was back to my pre-pregnancy weight because the only pregnancy weight I put on was physically the baby and the fluids. Yeah. So once they were out, that I wasn't able to put on that extra weight. To have that fight in me, which I didn't fully have, was really, really difficult. And that feeling of getting home feeling physically worse than I'd felt for a long time, and thinking I've got nowhere to go now. If I get worse, I can't go back to the hospital. I didn't trust that they would help me, was just a feeling of complete desperation. And at no point had that nurse asked about my mental health. I managed as well as I could do. I knew it would end. I had that light at the end of the tunnel that I was going to, all being well, get my baby. and I had as much support as as I could do in my network. But even then, the way that I was presenting, she should have thought, you know what, this woman's struggling, not just with HD symptoms, but I was absolutely sobbing, and she didn't ask me any questions about my mental well-being, but I was literally sent back out into a waiting room to sit and cry in front of other women. So yeah, I felt very much just like a vessel that wasn't important. It was, is this baby okay enough? Well, off you go then.
Well, honey, you must have felt so lost and so alone.
What definitely helped this time was being able to, I remember sitting on my phone messaging my peer support worker, saying, can you, please can you send me the links to the information about the ketones, and I don't think they're going to help me. And just having someone that knew that I wasn't making it up, which was how I was made to feel, really. Because also when I went into those settings, I wasn't actually sick in hospital. As I think quite a few people find, almost the adrenaline kicks in, and there were certain situations I could get through without being sick. And literally the second I stepped through the door at home or in my own car, when the adrenaline dropped and I wasn't observed anymore, I would then be sick, and for quite a long time after, because I'd used up every ounce of strength I had to keep it together in those moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, particularly being told that it would stop at 12 weeks. And the last time I was sick within the pregnancy was the day that I turned 40 weeks. And I was actually still sick for the week after, and had to be on meds for about 5 weeks after, until my body settled down.
What do you think HG has robbed you of?
That joy of pregnancy, those definitely the pregnancy glow. Although I know very few women that actually have that. I still looked forward to having my babies, probably even more, because it meant not only did I have my baby, but the sickness would end. But just, I remember my mother-in-law saying, enjoy, being so excited for us and saying, enjoy every minute. And then said, oh, how have you been feeling? And saying, that's when I said, awful. And it wasn't something that, she'd never experienced, that sickness. And I'd had to sort of really explain how I'd felt. And I just didn't always feel able to be fully grateful, which I hate. I am incredibly grateful that I've been able to get pregnant and have, healthy babies, but not being able to be grateful every minute of every day, and, that I was in that position. And even now, there are little triggers that I have. So if I get ill, it just takes me straight back there. It's potentially, we've not ruled out having a third baby, but the big thing to weigh up is, can we go through that again? And it might be the thing that stops us, because not only is it putting me and my body through that, it's putting my husband through, the being a sole carer and working and, managing everything else. It's putting the kids through it. And, the idea of having to put her through what my little boy had gone through to get her. And that has made it worth it, but it is such a big decision to weigh up. And I remember when I was pregnant first time, lying there dreading, thinking, we want more than one baby. If we don't want this baby to be an only child, I'm gonna have to do this again. And if I get sick now, I get these horrible flashbacks and just think, how on earth did I, if I'm sick now, I know it's only for a couple of days. And just thinking, how on earth did I do that day on day? It stopped me being able to work, which is a big part of my identity. But also, I do a little bit of independent work, and obviously I don't get sick pay off that. So it impacted my income, because there was a limit to what I could do as well. But it wasn't enough that I could sort of claim anything for it, for sort of a loss of earnings as well. And also my husband found things really, really difficult, that combination of the physical pressures put on him of how much he was having to do, and seeing me struggling so much. It was his mental health that was impacted too. It tested us, it tested our relationship, it tested both of our mental health and our resilience. And I was having people asking about me, how are you, and asking me all these questions. Sometimes a midwife would ask him generally how he was, but generally the focus was on me. And in many ways rightly so, but he was going through it in his own way, and there was a real limit of focus on him, and I needed him to be okay, because he was the one having to get home and sort me out, look after our son, and that was really, really difficult as well.
Hannah, I'm just going to touch on, we've got a new search just mentioning your husband's experience with your HG. We have actually got a new partner carer service which offers support for those people that are supporting a HG sufferer, which obviously wasn't in existence while you were suffering, but I think that's a valuable new resource that we have too. What advice would you give to anybody who's struggling with HG at the moment, and they're really struggling with the physical and the mental effects of the condition? What advice would you give to them?
Definitely to seek help, and as quickly as possible, and particularly if it's a subsequent pregnancy, or for me, I knew most likely I was expecting sickness even in my first pregnancy, because I knew my mum and sister had, and the lovely genetics. So getting help straight away, not thinking that you are making a fuss over nothing, because I think there's so many things, particularly as pregnant women, we just cope with, because we think, well, it's pregnancy, it's part of it, and almost feeling ashamed and embarrassed, I remember feeling a bit embarrassed that people would think I just had a bit of morning sickness and I was skiving off work when I literally couldn't get out of bed. I remember finding an email on my phone where I'd had to email my manager, and I'd had to do it off my personal email, and I'd said I literally can't get downstairs to get to my work phone. Just thinking that is so extreme. So getting that help and speaking openly about it, and I was really lucky to have good GP support, but going in armed. So I had, before my sickness kicked in, I read as much information as I could. So if I didn't get the support that I needed, I could sort of advocate for the care plan that I felt I needed. And if we do brave it and go for a third, one of the things I actually plan to do is maybe just write a note on my phone or something that I can give to a healthcare professional to read. So I'm advocating for myself in advance to say, if I'm asking for fluids, I'm not asking because I'm being a wuss, I'm asking because I am desperate. And talking to people really openly. I both times very quickly told people I was pregnant, which was something that I was happy to do. On another note, I felt it shouldn't be a taboo, of people having miscarriages. And I said to my husband, if we lose this baby, I need help with that. So I need help either way. And I didn't want it to be a big secret if something had happened and gone wrong. But it did take away from me that option, because I knew that if people saw me, the state I was in, very quickly people got worried until I told them why I was ill. And everyone gets really happy that then you're being sick, but, can still worry. So I was really honest with people straight away, and accepting the support. So things like having my friends come around and take over my kitchen and feed me and not get dressed all day is not something I would usually try and do. But just having to embrace that and say, do you know what, I've got that network, I need to make the most of it. So whilst I would never say to anyone, it'll be worth it, because people don't need to be told that, and that just invalidates your experience. The annoying part of it is, I wouldn't change a moment of it, and it's got me to where I need to be, but just trying to focus on, it's not forever, you'll get through it, and it will get you your baby, but don't let that take away that you're a human being in that process. And the main thing that I kill myself out on, and I say to other people, is, would you be dragging yourself to work feeling like this for any other reason? Would you feel like that for any other health condition and try and drag yourself through without help? And you wouldn't. But because it's pregnancy, we think we've got to get on with it. And that is where I had to call myself out, and I call other people out of, if you feel that ill, it's a genuine illness and you need to look after yourself.
Couldn't agree more, Hannah. Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I'm going to let you go because little Etta had some very sleepy eyes then. Whilst you were talking, there were some very sleepy eyes. But thank you, Hannah, so much for talking about your experience. It was lovely to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
If you or someone you know is suffering from HG, please visit www.pregnancymatters.org pregnancysicknesssupport.org.uk.